Today I got a gun so absurd it makes a stormtrooper look like a Navy SEAL. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Gyrojet, a 1960s fever dream where someone thought bullets are too boring, let's fire tiny rockets instead. And yes, that went about as well as you imagine. To understand the Gyrojet, you have to understand the 1960s. It was the space race. Kennedy was president and he was promising to put a man on the moon. Cars had fins like jet wings, and everything futuristic was always better. Jetpacks? Great. Nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners? Why not? Guns that fire actual rockets? Sure. Along comes Robert Mainhart and Arthur T. Bile, two inventors who founded the company MB Associates. They looked at normal bullets and said, instead of explosion happening all in the chamber, what if we just made rocket bullets that kept accelerating after it got out of the barrel? And thus, the Gyrojet was born.
What the hell is even that?
So what actually is the Gyrojet? Imagine a pistol or a rifle that doesn't fire bullets at all, but instead it fires miniature self-propelled rockets called microjets. Each round was about 13 millimeters in diameter and looked like a little missile, complete with tiny rocket nozzles drilled at an angle at the back end. These nozzles made the round spin, stabilizing in flight, hence the name Gyrojet. It acted somewhat like rifling on a modern barrel, but this was a smooth bore gun. Like I said, most of these were 13 millimeter in caliber, but that varied by model. These came in pistols, carbines, and experimental shotguns. There was even machine gun prototypes. The unique feature about the Gyrojet is that the recoil was minimal because the rocket accelerated after leaving the barrel instead of inside it. On paper, it was a weapon of the future. In reality, it was just trash. Here's where things get really funny. A normal bullet leaves the barrel at full speed. The Gyrojet round, it barely crawled its way out of the end at less than 100 feet per second. That's slower than a baseball. To put that into perspective, a 9mm round travels somewhere around 1100 feet per second, which is about 784 miles per hour. At point blank range, it could literally bounce off of cardboard. There's documented cases of Gyrojets not even penetrating paper from just a few feet away. But, and this is a big but, after about 30 to 40 feet, the rocket fuel had burned enough to get to full acceleration and was now going over 1200 feet per second. At that range, it could punch through steel helmets and flak jackets. So you had a weapon that was useless close up, but potentially terrifying at longer ranges. In other words, the worst possible design for a sidearm.
Brother, what's that?
It's like inventing a fire extinguisher that only works for a fire that's across the street. Of course, there was a few problems. There was a lot of problems. First off, each rocket was very complicated to make. Each one had precision drilled angles at the back and a solid rocket motor. In the 1960s, each round could cost about $3. That's over $25 today. However, due to the rarity, it's much higher than $25 today.
Kind of expensive, but the ammo is very expensive, right?
Ammo on average, you give about $5,000 for a box of 24, which is just over $200 a round.
$200 a round, and we are just gonna fire it into random things
per shot. So yeah, this isn't exactly a budget-friendly gun. Accuracy was terribly inconsistent, and the rounds would spin a lot. I'm assuming they keyholed a lot. If you don't know what keyholing is, that's where the round flips sideways. It wasn't very reliable. Sometimes the primer just wouldn't ignite. It just decided not to fire. And sometimes the rocket fuel just kind of fizzled out mid-flight. And only MB Associates ever made the ammo, so finding it is very hard. Reloading was super weird. It had a magazine, but it wasn't really a magazine. It wasn't removable. You just kind of loaded from the top, and then you had to press this trigger on the side that made each round move up into the chamber after you fired the last one. And like I said, at close range, it was completely worthless. Despite all of this, MB Associates tried to make the Gyrojet into an entire weapons family.
Bring it on, baby!
Like I said, they had pistols, carbine, full-length rifles, and they even experimented with shotguns that fired mini clusters of rocket ammo. I guess the thought process behind that was if your gun doesn't work, just make it bigger and louder. You may be wondering if the US military ever had any interest in these guns. Shockingly, yeah. During the Vietnam War, Special Forces tested the Gyrojet pistols in Vietnam. Special Forces tested the Gyrojet as silent killers. The rockets didn't make a loud bang like gunpowder, they just kind of made this whoosh sound. which sounds promising, except that the rockets still made a hiss like a bottle rocket. Not exactly stealthy when you're sneaking up on the enemy. The Navy also took interest, thinking that rockets might be good for SEALs and underwater operations. Tests showed the gyrojets had unpredictable performance underwater, and accuracy was laughably bad. Surprisingly, the military said, thanks, but no thanks. This thing barely worked when it was out of water. Why would it work any better in water? If the gyrojet couldn't win wars, it could win screen time. James Bond used gyrojets in the 1967 film You Only Live Twice.
Will interest you. Rocket guns. Very powerful. See the little hole in the back for jet propulsion. It's a fine gun.
Sci-fi fans later latched onto the futuristic look, and even today, collectors drool over them as rare oddities. If you had a working gyrojet with ammunition, you're looking at one of the weirdest relics of Cold War optimism. Let's take a closer look at the ammo. Each gyrojet round was essentially a self-contained rocket motor. It had a solid propellant core, an angled exhaust system to create spin, and a projectile nose. Problem? Making consistent micro rockets in the 1960s was insanely difficult. Manufacturing tolerances weren't great, so one round would scream off like a missile, while the next would just spiral into the dirt 2 feet away from you. Imagine your ammo deciding mid-flight whether it wants to be an RPG or a bottle rocket. Truly the Russian roulette of firearms.
George!
Did you not hear me out there?
Dad, are you
Go
all
to your room, Elroy.
But what happened?
Go to your room! For 45 minutes, I was out there screaming. I know that because my damn watch is broke.
Today, gyrojets are extremely rare and highly collectible. A working pistol can fetch tens of thousands of dollars, and the ammo, even more. Since it hasn't been produced in decades, surviving rockets are a collector's item. Some modern enthusiasts have tried to reproduce them, but trying to reproduce tiny rockets that won't explode in your hand is quite tricky. Owning a gyrojet today is basically like owning a lightsaber prop. It's cool, it's futuristic, but it's not exactly practical for home defense, unless you want to threaten burglars at your neighbor's house. So why did the gyrojet fail? It's too expensive, too unreliable, too rare, too weak up close, too inconsistent at range, and while the concept was genius on paper, the execution was a disaster. By the early 1970s, MB Associates had shut down production, and the gyrojet quietly faded away. But here's the thing, the gyrojet wasn't completely useless. It was part of a broader trend of experimenting with other ways to deliver a projectile. While the gyrojet itself failed, the dream of rocket-assisted weapons lives on, whether it's RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, or even modern smart munitions. In a way, the gyrojet is the ancestor to a lot of futuristic military tech. It just happened to be a hilarious fail in the process. So basically, the gyrojet was less of a firearm and more of a fancy bottle rocket launcher. Futuristic? Absolutely. Practical? Not even a little bit. But damn if it isn't one of the coolest gun fails in history.